Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? Popo here bringing you guys a new video, and today we're going to be doing our non-restricted Regulation G tier list. Let's go. Welcome, everybody, and today we're going to be doing our non-restricted Regulation G tier list. We did our restricted one back on Monday, and you haven't checked that video out, make sure you go do so. It'll be at the end of this video or in your recommendeds, probably right next to it. And let me know how that list went, and if you liked it, and let me know how this list went down in the comments when you finish this video. Also, I want to remind you guys that the Rayquaza raids are out for the shiny Rayquaza. Make sure you guys get one. I'm going to leave a link to my friend Donald Plays down below. He does guides for the raids, and he has a fantastic guide on how to beat the Rayquaza easily, so you can just get that real quick and move on with your life. But it's a really cool raid. You can only catch one, so make sure you do so before that goes away. But yeah, let's get right into this list. This is going to be a long video because I'm going to go through each of the Pokemon, even the bad ones, and we're going to tier them here. Usually I would throw the bad ones right into the trash already, but I'm going to talk about each and every single one, why it's trash, why it might be on every team, a staple, very viable, team-specific, niche viability, and trash. So these are going to be the tiers that we're going under rather than S through F or whatever. This is what we are doing. So, yeah, let's get right into it. Like I said, it's going to be a long one. I did mix these up for about 10 minutes before I started the video. I was going through just doing this. This was by, like, Pokedex number, so I don't know exactly where they are. I did throw the restricteds that were in here at the bottom. If I did miss any, we'll go through and remove them. So we're going to start right at the top here. We're going to start with the Dunsparce. Now, Dunsparce is a pretty interesting Pokemon as it has two really specific mechanics. And one of those being Serene Grace with Rock Slide. This is going to increase your chance of flinching. But it also has Drill Run. I think that's what it's called. It's called something like the Hyper Driller, maybe, where it breaks protects. And it's a 100 base power normal move, so it does get the stab off too. So you could do some really cool things with that. I have seen in the past some like Choice Scarf with that. And yeah, it can't be hit by Calyrex Shadow Rider's Astral Barrage, so that is a pretty good thing to be able to avoid as well. So we're going to put Dunsparce in the niche viability. I think if you want to use this Pokemon, you can, though you have to have a really strong team around it to support and really take advantage of one of those two really niche mechanics that it does take control of. Next is Arbok. It does get Intimidate, and Poison type is not the worst going into this format, but it's just pretty bad. Its stats are just terrible. It doesn't really do anything particularly well besides that Intimidate, but in that case, you can just use another Intimidate user. Next, we do have a Lowland Raichu, which I think is also trash. It can be super, super fast, especially with Miraidons running around, but it just doesn't do anything to the Miraidon itself to really make it worth it. And it doesn't do anything to support the Miraidon that regular Raichu already couldn't do if you were going to do that and just not use, Lightning Rod. But it just doesn't really do anything special. So it's just not very, very good. Being a Psychic type doesn't help it either because now it's weak to Astral Barrage. Not that Astral Barrage wouldn't one-shot Raichu anyways. Next, we have Sandslash. Sandslash is a pretty terrible Pokemon, always has been. Its stats are just so low that it really can't take advantage of any of them. And its move pool being okay with a lot of rock and ground type moves just doesn't really have the reach that some of the other ground types that we will see have, and just doesn't really bring anything to the table. It doesn't really have any good abilities or just doesn't do anything special. So just not very good. Gumshoes is awful. And by the way, these tierings probably won't be in order of how good they actually are until we're up in the every team staple kind of territory. They'll just kind of be thrown here. Gumshoes is just terrible. It's just a normal type, doesn't really do anything. Its abilities are awful. It just kind of exists. So yeah, I wouldn't use it. Next we have Farigiraf. Farigiraf is a staple in these restricted formats. If you go back to Worlds, we saw a lot of Farigiraphs. It's really, really good into the Caly-I Shadow Riders, as it can set up Trick Room right in front of them without really being pressured. It also stops the fake outs that might go into some of the Trick Room users without having to use something like the Indeedee, which could in part stop your fake out users like Incineroar, because oftentimes you want to pair this with Incineroar, as they don't really share any weaknesses, and they can work off of each other pretty well with an Intimidate, really stopping the Farigiraf from being knocked out on the turn, and going for Parting Shots is really, really strong for your Trick Room setup, so you can set up Trick Room, Parting Shot, and get out your big attacker. So Farigiraf is a staple in these formats, and I think we'll continue to see a lot. We also saw this on a lot of those Miraidon teams, especially the Terra Ground version, where you can go for this, stopping those fake outs that go into the Miraidon, and you get a humongous attack off to really just start destroying your opponent, and they really can't do anything because a Farigiraf is sitting there, and Helping Hand also helps. Vivillon was actually pretty good in this last Regulation H, though it has it's not very good going into this one. It's just so frail, and it's weak to a lot of the restricteds, so it just doesn't really bring anything to the table. Yeah, it has Sleep Powder, but you're better off just going for Spore with something like that Amoonguss, which is a lot bulkier of a Pokemon and can survive a couple of hits, especially from those Calyrex Ice Riders or even a Urshifu. So that's going to be a very big advantage to that Pokemon, where this thing just gets decimated by Urshifu, like, no questions. Vileplume is pretty terrible. I'm going to put Blossom here. They're playing, like, very similar roles. Yeah, they do have a slightly different typing, with the Poison being on the Vileplume. But that Poison typing isn't really giving anything of an advantage. The only thing Poison typing is very good against is going to be those Fairy types that are going to be in the format. Not that Poison type is a bad type, because it is really good, but Amoonguss is running the same typing and has a better move pool and more bulk. You're never going to really use Chlorophyll on these, because they are really slow already at 50 base speed. I think Blossom's also 50 base speed. I could be wrong on that. That only brings them up to 100, which means that they're still slower than a lot of the really good Pokemon that are out there. Next, we have regular Persian. It's also pretty bad. It just doesn't really do anything. It does get Fake Out. I think it gets Snarl. It might get Parting Shot. I know the other one gets Parting Shot, the dark one, but it just doesn't really do anything. It doesn't output any damage. It's just pretty weak. It's not a very good Pokemon. Next, we have Tauros Fire, and I would normally probably put this trash, but I'm going to put it in niche viability. It could play a similar role to that of the Incineroar, but also having that ability to go for fighting attacks could be a difference maker in a lot of matches. So I can't say it's bad, but with Urshifu sitting around, I don't think it'll be even team specific. I think it's very niche, and you're going to use this Pokemon for a specific team, like a very, very specific team and need. Politoed I'm going to also put in niche viability, because setting up the rain is always decent, and we just saw this thing win a regional. I know Perish isn't as good in a restricted format, if good at all, but this thing is also really, really bulky, and it pairs really well into something like that Calyrex Ice Rider and those Urshifu waters out there, so it can do something towards those. However, it is just kind of worse Pelipper in a lot of these teams, so it might be niche, and if you really like it and you don't like Pelipper, throw it on your team and use it instead. It'll still do the same thing for Archaludon, so... Dugtrio is pretty bad, so we'll just throw it down here. It just doesn't really get any good moves. It doesn't have a good ability. It just doesn't really do much. Its stats are pretty bad. Salazzle does get Fake Out and, like, can hit Steel types with Poison, I guess, but if you're going to do that, you might as well just hit him with the Fire types that you have already. So, no biggie there. It's just not very good. It can be used, and it has been used in the past in VGC, just not really in a restricted format. So I just don't really see its viability, even in a niche term. Heracross, I always get sad when I have to put Heracross in a bad tier, because I love Heracross as a Pokemon. It's just really bad. It's just so bad. Lilligant. I think Lilligant is very good. I think it's obviously team specific. You need to be running Sun, and then this Pokemon is good. And of course, this is going to be the Hisuian version. I think the Hisuian version is the best version because you're pairing it with a special attacking Pokemon. Now you have a physical attacking Pokemon next to a special attacking Pokemon. It often baits out the Intimidates, and it sometimes even baits out those Fake Outs. So you have a really good target for both of those in one single Pokemon. It also has Sleep Powder after you, and those are really, really strong options going into a lot of teams. Now, can you pair this with other stuff? Yeah, but I think you always just pair it with Torkoal because it just makes the most sense. Also, something people don't realize is you can go after you Trick Room, and a lot of people really, really don't know that. So if your Lilligant's going to get knocked out and you really need to get the Trick Room set up, you can always go for after you Trick Room and confirm that, bring in Torkoal or something like that when your Lilligant does get knocked out, and you're in a very good position. Next... Sylveon. I think Sylveon has some niche viability. Of course, we have Flutter Mane back in Regulation G, so it really hurts a lot of the fairy types in general. But I think people really still do like Sylveon, and it's bulkier, so you can have a little bit of advantage there. You go for, Hyper Voices that are now fairy type, which is really good, so you get some spread moves on a stronger attack than what Dazzling Gleam is, so... some advantage there. Also, Terra Blast is good on this Pokemon. It's essentially a Moonblast with 10 less power. And when you go for the Terrestrialization, you also gain that advantage there. So, really good Pokemon in general. Didn't really show up in Regulation H like I thought it would, but maybe Regulation G on some niche teams, this could be a successful Pokemon, especially on ladder. Electrode's pretty bad. You can go for some explosion stuff or some Electro Web stuff, but other than that, it's just a pretty bad Pokemon. It doesn't really bring anything to the table. Doesn't have any incredible stats except for that speed stat. And the Hisuian version is just better, though is also still bad. Snorlax. I'm going to put Snorlax in niche viability because you could still go for Belly Drum. I thought this is another Pokemon that would be a lot better into that Regulation H, though I think a lot of it is lost just because people know the strats, and it's pretty easy to stop, right? So, but if you can get a Belly Drum and a Trick Room off with this thing, you're probably going to win the game. Jumpluff is very viable. Once again, same with Lilligant. It's going to be team specific, but I think I think that Jumpluff is just a little bit more pliable, as you can use it with the Koraidon teams as well as the Torkoal teams. We have seen it be extremely successful in the Regulation H with Joe Ugarte and Marco Silva using it. And I think it can continue that viability. I planned out a team back before Regulation G dropped back all the way, I don't remember, like February, March or whatever, where I had Jumpluff Koraidon. I never made the team, but I think I might because I still have it set up. So I might make the team because I think it will be really good. Blissy's always just been terrible. It's worse than Chansey, and Chansey's not even good, so that just gives it to you there. It can't really do anything. I guess you can go Helping Hand. It gets like every special attack ever, like Blizzard, Ice Beam. It gets Fire Blast. Like, I don't think it gets Hydro Pump though, right? No, I don't think so. But it gets all those, so you could do some cool stuff with that. But Minshow's not, or Minshew, yeah. Chichito's not very good. Tail Slap, I guess. Rock Blast, Terra, but it's just not good. All right, these are interesting because we have seen in Regulation H both of these Pokemon be very good. I think that their niche viability now, I'm going to put them near the top. I'm just going to talk about both of them. With the avoidance of being able to be put to sleep is very, very strong. And in a format like this, that's going to be very valuable. Both of them can be made to be pretty bulky. And one can control speed where other can control the attack stat of your opponents. So if you go Magmar, it's actually pretty good into a Pokemon like Calyrex. Ice Rider, as you can go for, the Will-O-Wisp on it. Also, if you're Grass Terra or Water Terra, which is, I'd prefer Water Terra in this format, you can also get that off on Urshifu. I did use Magmar in this regulation, and in Regulation G back in the day, and it felt pretty good. I didn't use Electabuzz as much. But both of them felt pretty decent, but I think they're more niche. They are definitely team-specific, and they are viable, but I think more niche going into this regulation, just because Ogerpon exists, honestly. Next, we have Dugtrio. Dugtrio is awful. It's just so bad. It's so bad. It just doesn't do anything, and it just dies to everything. All right. Ditto. I think Ditto is team-specific. We saw like people like Aaron Trailer have really good success with Ditto, but it never really got over that hump. Being able to take your opponent's other restricted and now make it your restricted and just having double restricted is very strong. It's so strong. We also saw near the end that people are starting to use Transform, so that way they could transform into their own restricted Pokemon, which I found really interesting. So you can get like 2 Calyrex Ice Riders on the field and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. It doesn't copy the Terrestrialization, so maybe with Stellar Terra, you can also just turn into that, but it's kind of a toss-up on what Terra you want to use. I think Normal's probably the best, but who knows. Terrakion. Terrakion is also team-specific. We saw in the last time this regulation was around that actually this was a pretty good Pokemon with Whimsicott, with Beat Up. It was actually performing pretty well because you'd have to deal with that and then have to deal with their restricted in the back. The problem with this formation is the Calyrex Shadow Rider, so if you can avoid Shadow Riders, this is a pretty good matchup. It's really good into the Galapagos because you can beat up and then you can go for close combats and basically one-shot the Galapagos because you're +4. They're reducing the attack to not very effective. Often didn't matter. So, yeah, it was really, really good in some of those instances. Even going Moonblast and then on the next turn going Beat Up here also worked. So, some cool things. It does get stopped by Follow Me, and there's ways around that, of course, but keep that in mind. But it is pretty good, I think, team-specific. The Water Tauros, I think I'm just going to put it next to this for the same reasons. If you want to Water Incineroar, essentially this is what you're going to be using it for. You get those fighting attacks. It's plays differently, but I think it's around the same viability. The regular one is just bad because it doesn't have that additional typing, and yeah, doesn't really give it nothing. Flygon's a Pokemon I've wanted good for so long, and it's just so bad. Like, it's just worse than Garchomp, so like if you're using this instead of Garchomp, you're just throwing. Like, that's basically what it is. Regular Samurai, I don't think regular Samurai is really that great. It's just it just doesn't have that little bit more of a oomph. Its stats are kind of meh, and it just doesn't really do anything special. Gallade, I think Gallade is very viable. We've seen it on quite a few teams. It's really good into the Galapagos matchup as it has Wide Guard. Also hits it for super effective with Sacred Sword, so really, really good there. It's good into the Zamazenta because of that Sacred Sword once again. So you're getting a lot of viability off of this thing. It's really good into a Moongus too because it can go for that Psycho Cut. It just does so much damage. It's just good into so many things. If we run Night Slash, then it's good into like Lunala. It's good into Calyrex Shadow Rider because of that too. It's okay into Ice Rider. So with Sharpness Boost and a critical hit, this thing is taking out Pokemon like crazy. Ludicolo is not that great. Its typing is always interesting. It just doesn't have the stats to really push it over the edge. Vaporeon is pretty terrible. Just not a good Pokemon. Just not. You can try to make it work. It just never does. Breloom, for certain reasons, is up here, but in gameplay wise, it is probably niche viability. You can't just negate a Pokemon that has Spore, really. Especially one that can also do a few other things like Mach Punch. It's okay. It's not good. Its stats are pretty terrible, but here we are, right? Clefable, we saw Clefable have I don't want to say resurgence, but a surgence in Regulation H, where at one point it was one of the most used Pokemon. But in a format like this, it's just not very good. Dondozos aren't running around. You know, this whole format isn't about boosting stats as much as it was in Regulation H. So not as good. Will people still try to use it? Maybe. It could see some usage. Jolteon is terrible, just like Vaporeon. It just doesn't do anything. There's just better electric options out there, and with Miraidon hanging around, it's going to counter all the same things Jolteon, except 10 times worse. Rotom Fan is the worst Rotom. It's just bad. It's just bad. Berserker, I'm going to put Berserker on niche viability because with Zacian, it's actually pretty good because you do get a boost to your steel type attacks. There's a couple other Pokemon that can benefit off that as well, but just overall, it's not very good. Goldango is another one that gets a bonus off that without you having to go for Helping Hand. So we could see some of that just as a like niche one-off thing, but I don't think it'll ever be viable to the point where it's actually performing at any tournaments or anything like that. The trio, same thing, terrible. Regirock is pretty bad. I love Regirock. He's my favorite Reggie, but he's bad. He's just bad. Just doesn't really do anything. You can rock slide and stuff, but with Terra Rock, you could just do that with anybody basically. Espeon is bad. Like like Espeon at base level looks like it might be decent, but it just isn't. It just never is. Melodic's not too bad. I'm putting in niche viability. We did see some usage from it, but nothing really spectacular. It's one of the only Pokemon that gets Scald, but the funny thing is it doesn't really even use it. It's just super bulky. And it has competitive, right? Those are the two good things. Oh, man. So, we saw Latios do actually pretty good. And regulation, what was it? Was it before G? I think it was before G. It was pretty good, but it's just, I don't like it. It just doesn't seem good. Hoo-Hoo is bad. Clefairy is a team-specific Pokemon. We saw a lot of usage from Clefairy in the first Regulation G, especially early on. It's just a Pokemon that can really take away from your opponent, and we did see a lot of after use. So if they did set up the Trick Room with something like that Calyrex Ice Rider, you're able to switch something in and go for after you and still get those very powerful attacks off, especially with something like that Calyrex Shadow Rider we saw it with. Wolf Glick was using this in his Calyrex Shadow Rider team, so it just really, really shows the versatility of this little tiny Pokemon that, like, if you are coming from a non-competitive standpoint in Pokemon and you saw, like, oh, okay, this is my first tournament I'm watching. Oh, wait, that person has Clefairy on their team? Like, it seems wild, but honestly, it's pretty good. Leafeon has always been terrible. He's just not a good Pokemon. Like, he gets Chlorophyll, but he just doesn't have the damage output and just, like, feels really weak to use most of the time. Raichu, I'm going to put in niche viability. The reason for this is because Miraidon is so strong. You get the Fake Out, you get Nuzzle, you get Electro Web, but you also get that Lightning Rod, which is a huge advantage. So if you're using something like that Kyogre, this is a really good option to go into, as now Miraidon's only option of really hitting the Kyogre is going to be Draco Meteor, or if it's the Terifera, Dazzling Gleam, I guess. But with this out on the field, it just feels really, really strong. Stops your opponent from going for those Volt switches, which is really nice. You can also switch this in from the back to bait your opponent into going for the Volt switch, though. They might not fall for it. Maybe on ladder they'll fall for it, but it's less likely in an in-person tournament. So really, really good. Like, you can lead Tornadus plus Kyogre, switch this in. We've seen that a million times in a million different places. Porygon Z is not very good. I love Porygon Z. He's only been good ever once, and that was in Dynamax back in the day. Executor, also not very good. He can set up Trick Room. He can actually go for Expanding Force now, which is pretty good. You can do that Chlorophyll kind of team. I got destroyed by the team in Regulation G so many times. I'm just really bad against playing against it. Rhyperior, I feel like Rhyperior has some niche viability. If Miraidon continues to be good, this Pokemon could be decent. Yeah, it has 4 times weakness, it has no special defense, but it one-shots Miraidon. So let's get that going for it. It can't be intimidated if you're running the whatchamacallit on it, the Clear Amulet, and it can go for terrestrialization to get rid of those 4 times weaknesses it has, because it has grass and water. So you definitely want to get out of those. You can go into that water type because you can't be hit by electric attacks anyways, or you can go into something like fire, which is pretty good too, though he's still weak to those pre and post. Man, I remember a time when when Hitmontop was so good back in my day. Now it's just pretty bad. Incineroar just way outdoes this Pokemon, and one of the reasons why it was used was because Fake Out, Intimidate, right? And you had a way to get back with U-turn, but now Incineroar is just 10 times better than this Pokemon, and it's not even close, and it's just kind of sad to see the downfall. Articuno is actually pretty good. It saw some play in Regulation G the last time. I think it's still pretty good with that ice typing, and you set up the hail, and then you set up the Aurora Veil. This thing could be super, super bulky, but on top of it being bulky, it also can put out blizzards and do significant damage. We saw choice specs on it. I think it's definitely team specific. More than niche viability, but it's really frustrating to play against this Pokemon, and you go for the thing that will one-shot it, like a Rock Slide or whatever it might be, and you just miss. It feels so sad. Chansey is pretty terrible. If Shuckle was around, I'm just saying, he could be something. Regular Tauros, the same as this Tauros. Hypno is terrible too. He can put things to sleep, but he's just not. He doesn't do anything after putting them to sleep. I'm gonna put Ninetales up here because Ninetales does pair with the Articuno, though it's kind of meh going into this format. Once again, Fluttermane's back, so there's a lot of anti-fairy stuff. You're gonna see Heavy Slam from Zamazenta, so it's really, really strong against this. You might have to terrestrialize into water, but if you can get those Aurora Veils up, then you're doing all right. It's just the Zamazenta matchup into the Articuno team is just a complete wash. But I think Articuno's still pretty decent, despite that. Meganium is bad, unfortunately. I like Meganium's design, and I know it's one of the least favorite Pokemon, but it's just bad. Regular Typhlosion's pretty meh. Just doesn't really do anything. It does the same thing as Ghost one, except it can be faked out. This Persian is definitely better. It's still bad. I do like this Pokemon, and I actually used it back in 2016 in the double restricted format because it was really good into Groudon. Because you can get the Parting Shot off right away. You can go for Fake Out on turn 1, and then Parting Shot on turn 2. And you could set up your own restricted in front of it. But so far in this game, it just kind of has felt meh. Though maybe it is niche viability. I'll put it up here with Berserker, I guess. Just because it's on the edge there. It has Parting Shot, Fake Out. It has, Snarl. So it then can do a couple of things. It's very, very fast. It could take one Astral Barrage. So let's get that going too. This Articuno is pretty bad. I wish it was better because I do like this Articuno a lot. I love the design. And I love the shiny. The blue on the shiny looks so good. But it's just not very good. Hisuian, I'm going to put this in niche viability just because of the fact that people are going to go into this format like with Regulation H-Brain. And I think you're going to have to be a little bit ready for it. You might see it on 1 or 2 teams. Just people setting up the sun and going for those eruptions. It still does a ton of damage, even against a lot of these restricteds. And you might see it paired up with Groudons, maybe, going into this regulation, or Koraidons. So it's pairing really well with stuff that's weak to, and you can kind of take advantage of that. So, Wigglytuff, we saw Wigglytuff, do something back, earlier this year, but it's not good. It's just not good. It doesn't do anything. You can click Sing and hope for the best, but yeah. Gyarados also doesn't do anything. It can poison things. It can go for, I don't know, that web one that lowers the speed when they come in. I guess that's fine, but it just doesn't do anything. Lantern also doesn't do anything. It just, I think he gets Volt Absorb, but it should get Lightning Rod. If it got Lightning Rod, I think it would be actually a pretty decent Pokemon because its typing would be so good. Shift Tree, I thought Shift Tree would be a little bit better going into this format just because it's dark type and it can be faster than Calyrex if you get off the Tailwind, and then on top of that it gets the attack boost, so you just one shot the Calyrexes, but it never really showed up and it's just super super weak. I'm gonna put, it's tough, right? I'm going to put Dusclops in niche viability because I do think it's still pretty good. It's a good Trick Room setter. It's super, super bulky. It's not the greatest into something like that Calyrex Shadow Rider, but against stuff like Urshifu, it's so strong. Even Urshifu Dark like doesn't knock this Pokemon out. So it takes a double hit to just do anything. And if you have any Fake Out or Redirection, then you are perfectly fine. Victory Bell is terrible. It just doesn't do anything. Gets Sludge Bomb and maybe something else, but it's a special attack stat is pretty terrible. Florges is bad. If there was a really, really good grass type, I think Florges might be more viable, like a good restricted grass type, but there isn't. I mean, technically, I guess there is, but it doesn't use its grass typing, which is Calyrex. Ambipom is bad. It's a normal type that does Fake Out and double hits and just nothing else. Hitmonlee is also bad. I think Hitmonlee might get Wide Guard too. I think they all get Wide Guard, but I could be wrong on that. That's it. That's all he does. Scizor has some niche viability. If you really need a Steel type, like your team is super, super weak to Flutter Mane, this could be a huge advantage to you. And if you have a team that's good against Calyrex Shadow Rider and force them to actually go for that Fairy Terra, then bringing in Scizor at the end game could be a huge bump to you with that Bullet Punch Technician will just probably one-shot most of the Calyrexes, especially if it's Focus Sash, then you already did a little bit of damage to it, then you'll be in a perfectly good position. Bastodon, I wish this Pokemon was good, but it's so bad. It's so bad. I really wish it wasn't. I'm gonna put Muck here. If you guys remember, Muck was a menace in Regulation G the last time. Muck Smeargle. Expect to see some people using it because it's gonna be out there. I'm gonna put this in niche viability. I just think Lilligant is much better and Jumpluff is like leagues better at the moment, so I just don't see people really using Venusaur, though for nostalgia reasons people will definitely still use Venusaur, so just be prepared for it. It's gonna go for Sleep Powder, just know that. I always say this Pokemon's name wrong, so it's just gonna go down there and I'm not gonna talk about it. Wolf Glick put it best. Glaceon is the worst, is the worst of the evolutions, so it's definitely going down here. It could play a similar role to that of Articuno, but Articuno is just strictly better. Yeah, he couldn't even get to number 1 on ladder, and that's kind of scary. Cragnol's a Pokemon I really do like. It's just a Pokemon that's not very viable. It has really good special defense bulk, and it can output some pretty good damage, and it has a pretty good move pool. But it's just not good. It's just not good. Swampert, if this thing had Swift Swim, like its Mega Evolution, it'd be a good Pokemon. Zebstrika is terrible. It doesn't do anything. It just doesn't have damage output, and it's not good. I'm gonna put this up here because I still think these could be good. Like the Slowbro, Slow Kings and stuff, I think they could still be good. It's just really hard to use them effectively. I'll put him next to the other Sandslash. He's actually better, so you know you got that going for you. But he's just not good. Even with the new buff to the snow, he just feels terrible. Honchkrow is terrible. This Ninetales is pretty bad. There's already 2 good Sunsetters, so Ninetales is never really going to see. Fortress is terrible. It can go for Explosion and stuff like that, but that's about it. Quillfish, no. It's just really bad. Lycanroc, we saw some Lycanroc usage. I'm going to put it in niche viability, though it's team-specific, technically. On those sand teams, it could still do some stuff with Rock Slide and things like that, but it just feels pretty weak, and you're using 2 rock types, which is bad against fighting, which means it's bad against Urshifu. This Arcanine is not very good. Just use Incineroar. There's no reason to use that. Charizard is not very good, though. I'm going to put it up here. We saw in Regulation H how much damage Charizard can do. Whether that transfers or not is meh. So yeah. Cloyster's terrible. Man, it's so crazy to me with Gyarados, because Gyarados always starts off as like a really good Pokemon when a game drops, when there's like a super limited list. Like we saw a lot of Gyarados, right? Back in like Reg A, Reg B, even into Reg C, when they, started letting in like the first legendaries, the runes. But yeah, he's just not good. He's just not good in a lot of these higher power formats. You're terrible. You're terrible. Pikachu is also terrible. Oops, I lost him. Pikachu's also terrible. Like, it gets Lightning Rod once again, which is kind of viable, but just like the item you have to run on Pikachu to make it okay. You can run it similar to Raichu as just a fun option instead of running Raichu with like Focus Sash on it and Fake Out, Nuzzle, and you could do that, but for Alligator is pretty bad. It just doesn't really do anything. Like, Gyarados is just better than for Alligator, but for Alligator is just like, it's just not good, and I wish he was, because I like Feraligatr. I hope we get a new form of Feraligatr in the new games, but probably not. Golem, he goes for Explosion, which is always fun. Magnezone is pretty bad. There's already, like, once again, Miraidon's out there. People are going to have options against this thing, so there's nothing it can really do. Regigigas, he's a niche because you can use Weezing with him and do some significant damage, but it just feels like it's lacking, especially because it can't terrestrialize anymore, and then it just gets burned, and you're just in a bad position. Gastrodon is team-specific. I think Gastrodon is always a pretty viable Pokemon. The better Kyogre is, the better Gastrodon is. And that's just the way the world has worked for 4 million years, so... Okay, Ursaluna. Ursaluna is very viable. I'm going to put it at the top here. A lot of Trick Room users are going to use one of the two. I think the other one is better, but I think this Ursaluna is definitely still usable. If Amoonguss is stronger going into this format, then this will be even more viable. But right now, it will be just very viable. It's super strong. It has the strength of a restricted Pokemon without the downsides of it. It's not very good against Ice Rider, but it's super good against Shadow Rider. It's pretty poor against Urshifu, but it does have a lot of viability and can output a ton of damage. Next we have Electivire. He's pretty bad. You can use him actually Miraidon Discharge, and he gets a speed boost, so there's some cool stuff you can do with him, and he gets the punches, so you can have some really good coverage like Ice Punch and Fire Punch, but just overall, meh. Weezing is very niche. I'm going to put him with Regigigas. It's going to be niche, but it's still a good Pokemon, and it is pretty viable. Getting rid of abilities is always going to be strong, though you got to remember it doesn't work on a couple of the Pokemon, which is very unfortunate, and that's going to be like the Calyrexes. But it does work pretty well into Urshifu, so you can take advantage of that a little bit, and yeah, it's still a Pokemon. Macargo is bad. This is another Pokemon. I really love Macargo. I remember back in the day having Macargo on my team and like being like, oh, this Pokemon's so sick. Like, it's so cool. And it's just bad. It's just bad. Meowstic is bad. It just doesn't really do anything. Prankster is cool. You can skill swap Prankster onto something like a Amoonguss, but then you have two like useless Pokemon out in the field, so who's the real winner here? Mamoswine, I thought Mamoswine would show up a little bit more in this Regulation G or Regulation H that we just had, and didn't, so I can't really put it high either. Heatran, I think Heatran is team specific, but this Pokemon is still really good. It can be super bulky, output some damage. We saw quite a few teams using it. It did lose a little bit of that viability because, it's like Miraidon is so strong. and there's some really good fighting types, and then you got Urshifu, so it has dropped down quite a bit, like, but I think it's still a decent Pokemon, and it'll be team specific. If you need a special fire type, this is probably going to be your option. The steel type is really good. Like, this thing destroys Flutter Mane, so that's pretty good too. Speaking about destroying Flutter Mane, Metagross is terrible. This is a Pokemon that people swore by going into his release with the DLC. People are like, man, this Pokemon's going to be so good. Oh, I can't wait to use Metagross. It's going to be so good. And I was like, I don't think so. I think Metagross is going to be terrible. And it has been absolutely terrible. Probopass, of course. Probopass is on every team in my fantasies because I love Probopass. Yeah, Probopass is awful. He's so bad, but I love him so much. I love him so much. I'm just going to put him up here for the same reasons. I think he's worse than the poison one. Quick Draw is a pretty good ability, so... Skamori, if this was singles, he'd probably be pretty good. I don't know if he's still good in singles, I'm going to be honest with you, but he's pretty bad. Dugong, I think Dugong is a niche ability, niche viability Pokemon. Gets Perish Song, huh? It does a couple of things, but it's just not good enough. But I think it's a really cool Pokemon and kind of underexplored. Minxiao, now it's Minxiao, not Chinchino, like before. I think it's team specific. We saw a lot of usage of this Pokemon in the last regulation. We saw Feint, fake outs, stuff like that on Calyrex teams. And yeah, it performed pretty well. Also gets Wide Guard, which is a huge advantage, especially in the mirror match of Shadow Riders. So really good. Smeargle. Smeargle is very viable. It's just really good. It can do so many different things. It could do everything all these Pokemon do, like support-wise, just in one Pokemon, though it is super, super frail. And yeah, we saw at the end of regulation transform Smeargle. So it'll be interesting to see if we start seeing some transformed Smeargles again, with Choice Scarf taking, turning into a second Calyrex on your team, or, a second Miraidon or something. Really interesting Pokemon, and I think a lot of people are scared to try this Pokemon often, and that's why it doesn't really see the usage, because they're like, it's just so weak, right? It's just so weak, and then they just don't put it on their team. But I think it could see some usage. Raikou is pretty bad. It just, I know it got Worlds back in 2021 or whatever it was, 2022. That guy should have won. He got ripped off, but it's beside the point. It's just not very good. Gets Snarl, gets Thunderbolt. Entei is team specific, I think, playing a similar vein to Heatran, except for physical attacker, which is probably more commonly used in this fire type. It can't be intimidated, can't be faked out, so that's a huge advantage to it too, and that's why we saw a lot of usage for it. It can go for those normal Terras to get away from those Astral Barrages, and it also goes for those choice banded extreme speeds. So Oricorio Fire is not very good. It just doesn't do anything. It's pretty bad. Always have to put this in niche viability. There are going to be a lot of ghost terrestrializations on some Pokemon because of Urshifu being so strong. So it makes it a little bit less viable, but I mean, you always have to put, the Perish Trap, or not so much Perish Trap, but just Shadow Tag in general, like pretty decently, because it could just be strong at any point. Emboar is awful. Camerupt is another Pokemon. I'm like, man, I like this Pokemon, but he's just awful. Like, Mega Camerupt was so bad too. This Golem's better than the other Golem. I don't know where I put the other Golem. Oh, he's down here. It's better because it's electric type. So that's it. All right. This is this is going to be a high team specific Pokemon. I really, really, really like Annihilate in this format. I just think it's harder to use. It, like, at 207 HP, it like one-shots Calyrex Ice Rider, which is a huge, huge like line to know. with the final gambit, so it's really, really good into that. It's actually just good in general into Calyrex Ice Rider, and with certain Terras, it's actually good into Ice Rider or Shadow Rider as well. So there's quite a few things this Pokemon can do, and you will be seeing me using this. So on my first team, I already have my team built and ready to go. I'm going to be using Annihilate. Uxie is terrible. Tyranitar, okay. So if you go back to my original Regulation H tier lists, G tier lists. Sorry, I keep getting them mixed up. It's so confusing that they're going back to G, so my little brain is like hates it. It's like alphabetical order, but no, it's not. I rated this Pokemon very highly, and Len showed that it can work. That's it. Only Len. I still believe. Klotzer, I didn't even know he's in the game, but he's not very good. Gengar is also not very good just because how strong Calyrex is. There's a lot of anti-ghost stuff, so you're not really getting any power off of Gengar where you could just get somewhere else. Pachirisu is pretty bad. It just doesn't really do anything. It gets follow me. If you guys didn't see the video where I used Sage and Park's team, Pachirisu was actually the best Pokemon on the team, and that's like not even an exaggeration in the year of 2024. Mighty Anna, I didn't even know he was in the game either. Magmortar, I'm just gonna put him next to this boy because they're buddies. It's just not very great. I think we saw somebody do pretty decent with a Magmortar in Regulation G last time, but like it was just like an outlier. I think this is a high niche viability. Hisuian Arcanine's actually pretty good still, and I think if you're going for those rock slides, or even better yet, you go for those head charges and stuff, this Pokemon just does so much damage. It does so much damage, and it could just one-shot certain restricteds. Calyrex Ice Rider with that. So if they're not running like Calyrex with Indeedee or Calyrex with Farigiraf, you can get this off pretty easily. Even if they're running with the Farigiraf, I guess you could just get this off. And a lot of them are actually fire Terras, so that way they can't be burned. And so the head smash, or whatever it's called, the rock one, does a lot of damage. Tentacruel is pretty bad. Bayonetta is pretty bad. These Pokemon just don't do anything. Tentacruel is just like pretty meh water type. And Bayonetta just like, once again, there's just better ghost options, and there's a bunch of ghost counters. Whatever this thing's name is, I forgot. It's pretty bad. It just doesn't do anything. High jump kick, like go. Blaziken saw a very big resurgence in Regulation G, but it's just a bad Pokemon in general. It's crazy how that resurgence happened. Lapras, Gigantamax Lapras. If we had Gigantamax Lapras, honestly, this would probably be on every team. But because we don't, it's trash. It just doesn't do anything. You can get a Roarveil up, but you have to sit up. It's bad. Azumarill hasn't really shown how strong it is in this generation in general. And it's kind of sad because I like it. Poliwrath is another Pokemon I've always loved. It's actually was my first holographic card. Crazy. I actually have one right here because I bought one because I wanted to remember that this is my first holographic card that I ever owned. This isn't the specific one. Who knows where that one is, but yeah, I love Poliwrath. Maybe just because of that, but I've always just loved him in general. I remember using him in my playthrough back in the day too, and yeah, he's just so bad. He's just so bad, isn't he? Gardevoir also really bad. Flutter Mane exists. There's no reason to use Gardevoir. It has Psychic typing, but that's not going to stop it. It's just going to get one shot. Sudowoodo. Sudowoodo's always been super bad. Just doesn't do anything. Dragonite. I think Dragonite is a team-specific Pokemon. I think this is still a really good Pokemon. And it's better than Rayquaza. So it's got that going for it too. It's just, it doesn't work on every team, especially with Farigiraf's hanging around and Indeedee's hanging around. You're not really getting the value out of the Dragonite like you used to. And Outrage is still very, very strong, though you're always probably going to want to be normal Terra because then you can't get Astral Barraged, so that's good too. Golurk is very bad. Yeah, we saw Wolf Glick do well with it, but that was just a one-off. Lucario, I just forgot his name for a second, is awful. Just use any of the other Steel-type Pokemon that we've already had in our list. Galarian Zapdos. I thought Galarian Zapdos would be better than what he is, but he's pretty trash. Actually, I'll put him in niche because he did see some usage the last time around. He does do some pretty good damage, and with Terra, he can do even more. But just like he's just Urshifu exists. That's the problem. Urshifu makes so many Pokemon not viable. I'm going to put Slacking next to these two. I think he's a little bit better than Regigigas, but he's still pretty bad. Even in non-restricted formats, he's just never really done anything. Hariyama is bad. This Pokemon used to be so good back in the day, but Iron Hands exist. The Volbeat, we saw Volbeat in Lumitis do okay, but I don't think they're going to do okay in the restricted formats. Because they didn't last time. They did in pre-restricted format. Reuniclus is probably here too. I was just thinking for a second. Because it can go for Expanding Force, but there's just better options. There's just better options. Regular Zapdos is... he's just worse than Galarian Zapdos right now. Once again, Electric is just such a prevalent type that people are going to have counters to electric types, whether that be just a Pokemon like Ursaluna, or if that means like, any other ground type or ground Terra. It just makes Zapdos that much worse. Inteleon is bad. You can do some like crazy sniper techs and stuff, but it's just not really worth it, honestly. Flareon has just kind of always been bad. You could set up Trick Room, he could do some damage, but Blastoise has always been bad too. Though it's kind of funny because in Regulation G, I actually made a Gen 1 team and it focused on Blastoise because, he was like one of the only good ones. And yeah, we got up to like 1300s on Showdown, and like we've only lost like 3 games or something like that to get the 1300, which was kind of crazy. This one's better than this one in the restricted format just because Fairy is just slightly better. I guess maybe not anymore because Zamazenta and Zacian, but nobody's using Zacian, right? But either way, these are interchangeable or whatever, so do it as you like. If you're going to use them, use one. Masquerain is terrible. Gets Intimidate. Man. Crawdon, like, he has such a cool mechanic, but he's garbage. Just some of these Pokemon are just so bad, and I'm like, man, I wish they were good. Gliscor is he was good for like a week in Reg G, but he's bad. All right, Sableye. I think Sableye is very niche, but it's very good. It can burn things at priority, which is super strong. He's really good against Zamazenta, just in generalized. And yeah, he could just do a couple of things like that. Quash is always super strong too. You can quash other people's, Calyrexes and just do massive amounts of damage. Conkeldurr is pretty bad, though I almost lost to Conkeldurr last time H was around. Very niche is Serena. Serena can stop priority moves the same as Farigiraf, but the difference is it's weak to Calyrex Ice Rider. So, yeah. Scyther is pretty bad. Amoonguss. Amoonguss is one of the best Pokemon in restricted formats because you get 1 restricted, in this format specifically, or 2 restricted in some formats, and just not being able to use them for like 2 turns while your opponent can keep using theirs is just extremely strong. Be able to take away attacks from your restricted so they don't take damage into a Pokemon that, has rechargeable health is very strong. So there's just so many different options for Amoonguss, and in these kind of formats, it's just an absolute menace. Spore is just so busted. Regenerator is so busted. Put a Citrus Berry on this thing or a Rocky Helmet. I prefer Rocky Helmet. And you just have an absolute... You just have a unit of a Pokemon that just really can control the whole flow of the battle. And yeah, there's a whole item in the game to stop this one Pokemon. So, Dragalge, it's terrible. Kingdra, despite what might have happened at this last regional, terrible. Floatzel, one of the worst Pokemon in the game. Okay, Como-O. I think Como is team specific. I think it's still pretty good. Terra Steel on it is very, very good as it covers a lot of its weaknesses, and then you can go for, you know, the Iron Defense stuff. I have a video where I faced June Lintner, and they used Como on their team with Dawn Wings, I believe. Yeah, it was Dawn Wings, and yeah, it was pretty good. But yeah, I think it's pretty viable. All right, Torkoal. Torkoal is not very viable, team specific. Torkoal, however, is very viable. This is a really good Pokemon. You can use this on Calyrex Ice Rider teams or just hard Trick Room teams with Lunala. You can go for, you know, Lilycole and stuff like that. Very, very viable Pokemon. It just outputs consistent damage, which is really nice. And it almost one-shots Calyrex Shadow Rider if they're not super bulky, which puts it in a perfect range for you to go for Eruption and Glacial Lance and knock out Calyrex Shadow Riders. So that is fantastic. Haxorus has always been bad. He's just not good. Is he a pseudo legendary? He is, right? He's gotta be. He's bad. Crocodile is terrible, right? I don't know why I'm slow rolling it. He's awful. Once again, same thing about these two. He's just slightly different. Granbull gets intimidating. He's a fairy type. Other than that, he's terrible. Klefki, I think Klefki is a niche viability. I'm going to put it with this. This is probably more up here, to be honest. I think that Sableye is better, but you could use Klefki. You could set up, you know, you set up like Light Screen and Reflect, and you can also go for Trick Room. So it does a little bit different stuff. Vespiquen, I love Vespiquen's design and everything, but it's just a terrible Pokemon. Basile, I always call this Pokemon the wrong Pokemon. Is it Basilegion? That's right? That's right. It's team specific, but it's a very good Pokemon. It can outspeed the Calyrex Shadow Rider if you have the rain up, and it can one-shot it. So very, very good Pokemon in those cases. We saw some use of it in early Regulation G and some in Regulation H, but I think it's still a team-specific Pokemon. I think it's really, really good. Cacturne is awful. This thing that turns into Basilegion. Altaria is pretty awful too. It just doesn't really do anything, though it is a very unique typing that gets Will-O-Wisp. So, yeah. The female Basilegion is awful. It has a higher special attack, but it doesn't really get any good moves. So, Swanna is terrible. Dusknoir is terrible. Okay, here we go. A very viable Pokemon here. We got Roaring Moon. We saw a lot of usage of Roaring Moon. It's extremely good into that Calyrex Shadow Rider, especially if they aren't that fairy variant. This Pokemon just does a ton into it. It goes for the Flying Terra. It gets the booster energy, acrobatics. It's going for tailwinds. It's going for knockoffs. It just does so much. It one-shots Amoonguss if you get that booster energy, max attack. And you go for the acrobatics if you're not the speed variant, of course. So, yeah, it just does a ton, and it can terrestrialize into a few different things, but usually you're going to see that terrestrialize into a flying type. We did see some steel type too, but I wouldn't expect it. Weavile's pretty bad. It just doesn't really do anything. It gets Fake Out, Ice Shard. You can set up some weakness policy stuff with it, but other than that, it's not really the one. Arboliva doesn't do anything. Rillaboom makes this Pokemon useless. I know we saw some of it in Regulation G where people were using Arboliva, but it never really performed super, super well. I can't think of this Pokemon's name for some reason. I know it starts with a V, but it's yeah, I mean Bug Buzz does a lot, Thunder does a lot, but it's just not very good. We're gonna put this up here. I think this is the best one. He's just very good, and he can get rid of your stat drops when he comes in, so that's always good. This is bad for the same reason that the other Oricorio was. Unfortunately, Hydreigon is bad. I know this shares a typing with it, but the difference is this is a special attacker, and you'll have to commit your terrestrialization to this whenever you see a Flutter Mane. Whereas this can actually outspeed Flutter Mane if they aren't booster energy, and it can one-shot Flutter Mane, so it's got a lot more. Love Disc is like I put it next to it on accident. Should evolve into this. Let's be honest. Let's just be honest here. Rotom I thought he would be better in Regulation G, but he just wasn't. Volcarona, I think, still has some viability. I'm going to say it's team specific. We saw a lot of people using this to counter the Zamazentas because those were huge at one time where it was like just Zamazentas everywhere. And it does a really, really good job countering those. It's also good against Urshifu, especially if you go for like the grass terrestrialization. Then you can, redirect it into the Volcarona and you can get a burn, which is really, really nice. Chestnut, I love Chestnut, but he's just not good. This dude, Glade, he's terrible. Tropius is terrible, doesn't do anything. You can set up Tailwind. Oh, one of the worst Pokemon in the game, Sunflora. Ferret's even better than Sunflora, I'm going to be honest. Okay. Okie dokie, right? He's right there. No, he's not falling down. But Brawly's on his face, but that's beside the point. He is actually pretty good. If you can get him behind some screens and have him start setting up, he can actually do some stuff. I'm going to put him actually higher up here. He's better than this. He's better than this. His typing is pretty decent too, and he one-shots Flutter Manes. Suicune, I'm going to put Suicune on the niche. I think it's okay. It can go for like Tailwind as a non-flying Pokemon, which is really good, and he's super bulky while doing it, and you can go for like Icy Wind. He has shown in restricted formats in the past that he's been pretty viable, but he did lose Scald, so Chimecho is awful. Salamence, I thought Salamence would be a lot better than he has been in this generation, and he's just been awful. Registeel, we saw Registeel actually playing a pretty good role. I'm going to put him in niche because he does what Zamazenta does, so anything that counters Zamazenta is going to counter this too, but he is pretty strong if you get him set up. Carbink, I think Carbink, honestly, I'm not even going to lie, is a niche viability. This Pokemon is super bulky, can set up Trick Room, and go for body presses, so it could do some stuff. Weirdeer, I thought Weirdeer would be better because this typing is pretty good. I mean, it's the same as Farigiraf, and he does kind of the same thing. It's just that ability sets it apart. Midday form, I think it's the same as the other one, but I'm just gonna put him here. Latios is pretty bad. It just doesn't really do anything. Indeedee Male, I'm gonna put this in niche still because it does have some viability with the terrain. And it can go for Expanding Force on its own. And it also gets after you, but nobody uses that for some reason. I'm going to put this up here. Umbreon is pretty good, just because of how good it is into both of the Calyrexes. It really pressures them into having to make decisions. Also good by like happenstance against like Lunala. It gets Snarl, which is huge, and it gets Foul Play. So it's really able to pressure both in different ways. Houndoom is pretty bad. He just doesn't really do anything. He's fighting dark. He's fire dark, and just not good at really either one. Ampharos also pretty terrible. It's just the electric type, and as we already talked, electric types are terrible because of the good electric types. Minun is bad. So is Plusle, wherever Plusle ends up being. There it is. They're one and the same. You face them in the DLC at the beginning, but I don't even think they have the plus and minus ability, so it was like, okay. Empoleon's really, really bad. I want it to be good because I really like Empoleon, but it's another Pokemon that just kind of feels really mad to use. It just feels significantly worse than Melodic, so yeah. Staraptor is okay. He gets Intimidates, gets Tailwind, but he just doesn't really do much other than that. Garchomp, I think Garchomp is a team-specific Pokemon. Garchomp is always just like there. He might even be down here in niche viability. He's between these two. Fluttermane really puts a lot of pressure on him, so I'm gonna put him in niche viability. Leaf Annie is awful. This is another Pokemon I love and I wish was good. Any bug Pokemon, just let bug be good, please. Cricktoon is awful. This is one of the worst Pokemon in the game too. I really like Cricktoon, but he's not good. Luxray, people talking about how Luxray used to be dark when he never was because like they're just misremembering just because of how he looks. Okay. So we got Landorus T. If this was any other generation, bruh. Landorus T. Trash tier, boys. He's trash tier. He is garbage. Why is he so bad? I have no idea. I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. Like, I try to rack my brain around it, and I'm just like, he just feels bad. He just feels bad. Doesn't matter what item you put on him. Doesn't matter what attacks you put on him. Doesn't matter what terrestrialization. He just feels bad. Just feels bad. Next we have Malamar. He's also trash. You can go for topsy-turvy stuff, which is pretty interesting. You can, if your Pokemon is using Draco Meteor and you could topsy-turvy, turn it into pluses, which is pretty cool, but it's just like, eh. I can't think of his name either. Scyther, Scizor, the stone one. So I shouldn't do these videos when I'm tired. Yeah, he's just pretty awful. Like, he has a good move. He sets up the rocks and, that does some damage to your opposition when they come in. So he has a lasting effect on the battle. But as you can see in Regulation G, he's just never used because it's not very good. Regular Muck, no, you're just gonna use this Muck because he resists Astral Barrage. This one is better than the other Electrode, though I don't know where the other Electrode is anymore, so we'll just, oh, there he is. It's just better because it also has the grass typing. Go for Bullet Seed. You can power up your own Pokemon with Bullet Seed, like your Archludon, and do some interesting things like that. Trevenant's pretty bad. He can set up Trick Room and stuff, but his attack stat is just too low to make him super, super viable. He is pretty bulky, but just not worth it. Hippowdon, he's just worse. Like, if Sand also powered up ground types, I think Hippowdon would be actually a very, very good Pokemon. But since it doesn't give that special defense boost to ground types, it's just kind of useless. Primarina, I think Primarina is still definitely usable. I think it's very team specific though. It just doesn't have the physical bulk to really take anything, but its typing is pretty good. And on certain teams, I think it could just be a strong option. Meowstic, this Meowstic is just worse because it doesn't get Prankster. Clodsire is terrible. He just doesn't do anything. His typing's interesting, ground and poison, but like his attack stat, like all his stats are just so low besides his like HP. Mabostiff is awful. He does get Intimidate, but like look how sad he looks, bro. He should be on every team. Wiglet is just worse than Dugtrio. I don't know how that's even possible, but it is. Thundurus is always going to have some niche viability. I think this Pokemon is okay. You can go for Thunder Waves and stuff and really put pressure on your opponent with just some speed tier stuff. But it's not really doing too much. I did try a physical attacking one because Intimidate was out there like quite a bit. And it just felt like duty. This is terrible. Infernape is terrible. This is supposed to be down here. See, I did miss some. Yanmega, despite what Wolfglick might make you think, this Pokemon is actually terrible, especially in this format where the power level is just so high. I'm gonna put this in niche viability. I'm gonna put this at the bottom because I'm just gonna put it here. Armrouge he does a couple of things, but like in this format, it's really hard to take advantage of those. He's really bad into Calyrex, so he's got that against him too. So he's meh. Grimmsnarl, however, is actually very viable. Grimmsnarl's pretty strong in a restricted format, as he makes those restricteds do basically half as much damage, which is huge. In non-restricted formats, that half as much is damage. The half as much of damage isn't really as significant as it is against the stronger Pokemon, because it becomes more exponential as the attacks get higher. So if you're doing 50 damage to 25 is a lot less. You're only losing 25 damage, whereas if you were doing 100 damage now you're doing 50, that's 50 damage in between there. So it gets a lot more value off of those restricted Pokemon. So that's why you see it a lot better in these restricted formats. It's also good against Calyrex, Ice Rider, and Shadow Rider, because it gets you can use Snarl, but you're just going to use Foul Play, and it can Foul Play both of them and knock, at least knocks out Shadow Rider. Skuntank, this is a Pokemon I wish was good. It just isn't. It just doesn't have enough damage output. Its stats are okay, but not okay enough. Donphan, man, I remember when this thing was shown in the original Pokemon movie, bro. It was so hyped. But other than that, it's bad. So... next we have Cresselia. Cresselia is very viable. We saw a lot of Cresselia usage in the last time this regulation was around, because it is a pretty reliable Trick Room setter. It is bad against Calyrex Shadow Rider, but it could still set it up in front of one, because it can take an Astral Barrage, because it's super strong like that. Moltres, Galarian Moltres is definitely team specific, but this is a very good Pokemon. It puts a lot of pressure on both of the Calyrexes. You can boost it up. It gets boost off of just existing when your opponent hits it with an attack. And you could take advantage of that by just unleashing huge attacks and like Trick Room and stuff when they hit it with Calyrex. Then you can get off yours. Plus, it has I think it's 30% chance to flinch, and that hits both Pokemon. So. Just different color Gastrodon. And if you guys think this is going to be controversial, I'm not putting it in any specific order. They just both exist. They're the same Pokemon. Oranguru. For me, Oranguru's on every team, baby. But for the average person, I think Oranguru is a niche Pokemon. I think it's extremely, extremely good. Doesn't get hit by Astral Barrage. It's almost guaranteed to get up a Trick Room, except against like something like that, the Urshifu Dark. But those are few and far between compared to Urshifu Water. So you're almost guaranteed every single time to get up a Trick Room with this Pokemon. Can't be faked out. There's not really too many Pokemon that knock it out in one shot, especially those restricted Pokemon. None of them knock it out in one shot. So if you have like Fake Out, you can guarantee getting that up, and then you can go for Instruct, which is a lot of fun. Monkey Dory, I wanted this Pokemon to be good, but he's so bad. He's so bad. Pelipper. Pelipper is definitely team specific, but it's very good. I'm gonna put it up here. It only works on certain teams. You're usually going to use it with a Zamazenta. It gets that wide guard, which is a huge deal, and it does pretty good damage into some of the meta, especially stuff like that Amoonguss, where you can just pressure it and make it switch. Bronzong is not very good, but I'm going to put him at the top of trash, because he does have some viability, but once again, Calyrex Shadow Rider makes it really hard to use this. Koraidon makes it really hard to use this, because you have to use Levitate. If you use Heat Proof, maybe then you can use it into the Koraidon, but Koraidon Terrafire, I think, still one-shots even with the Heat Proof. So, yeah. Frostlass, I like Frostlass, but it's bad. Ursaluna Blood Moon is a staple Pokemon. We saw this Pokemon being extremely good since its release. I was gonna say since the format last round, but just in general, this is a very good Pokemon. Doesn't get hit by Calyrex, can also hit Calyrex. So yeah, it's just so good. Its speed tier is like kind of in the perfect place too, because then it outspeeds like Calyrex Ice Rider, and it's so good. It's just such in a good place. Both Rotoms that we have here are bad. They just don't do anything, right? They just are bad. Speaking of don't do anything, Incineroar. Incineroar. You got to run Clear Amulet if you're running an attacking restricted. You have to. Like, just because of this Pokemon existing. It's just insane how good this Pokemon is. Fake Out, Knock Off, Parting Shot. You don't even have to run Flare Blitz anymore, which is crazy. If you told me in like 2017 that, or 2018, that like you could use Incineroar and not use Flare Blitz, I'd call you crazy. I'd be like, nah, bro, you have to have Flare Blitz. Even if you're running it on a rain team, you gotta run Flare Blitz, bro. You don't. It's the best Pokemon of all time, statistically speaking. It's the best Pokemon of all time. Screamtail. I love Screamtail. I am not very good with using Screamtail. I know a couple of people who are, like June Lintner is very good with using Screamtail. But me? No. I'm terrible. I'm terrible. Okay, and then we have a Alolan Executor, who, if it was me, once again, this is every team. I love this Pokemon. That's why whenever I make those videos, like, hey, try these teams, I'm always trying to put one of these on the team, right? I love this Pokemon. It almost got me qualified for Players Cup 3, though I shouldn't have listened to people because I would have qualified if I just didn't play more games. But anyway, Quagsire is terrible. He doesn't do anything. He has Unaware. But he's also unaware he's here. So, Mesfit is terrible. Is it the worst one, or is Uxie the worst one? I think Uxie's the worst one, right? Excadrill is very bad. I know it's seeing some play now, and it seems kind of viable. It's just not. It's just not. Okay, well, you know, sometimes this Pokemon, you just put them up here. You don't really need to talk about them. They're just the strongest Pokemon in the whole game. And that's Urshifu. Whimsicott is a staple. We saw Whimsicott on tons and tons of viable teams. Sorry, I was just collecting my thoughts. My brain's running wild. This Pokemon can go for stuff like Tailwind, Encore, Moonblast. It's one of the only Pokemon that is really, really good into Urshifu, as Urshifu can't hit it for like anything more than neutral with either of its moves, so that's really, really strong. It also pressures it with a Moonblast to one-shot it, so this is a really, really good Pokemon and one of the only counters to an Urshifu in general. And in my opinion, the best Trick Room set, or Tailwind setter, not Trick Room. It can set Trick Room too, which if you want it for that, go ahead. But yeah. Doxbun is awful. Man, I used Doxbun way back in the day when the game first came out. I won 3 locals with Doxbun without like hesitation. And this was right before San Diego, which was the first regional in the format, like in the game's history. And I got really, really sick like for 2 weeks. Like I was bedridden for 2 weeks. And for some reason, while I was sick, I had a bright idea of making a new team because I couldn't use Doxbun at the regional. Like, that's stupid. Yeah, I went 1-5. All right, so never make a team when you're very sick. Just use Doxbun. Oricario, also terrible. We already talked about that. Regular Lilligant is not as good, and it's not team-specific. It's going to be down in the niche viability. It's worse than Venusaur. Oh, it's worse than Venusaur, and it's way worse than Hisuian Lilligant, because Hisuian Lilligant, once again, it's it's faster, and 2, it has close combat and Leaf Blade or Solar Blade. I like to use Solar Blade. I live on the edge and go for Solar Blades, but yeah, it's way, way better. Hitmonchan is terrible. I almost put him with the Hitmonlee. That was almost perfect. Araquanid, people have been talking up Araquanid since he dropped in the game, and he has not shown up, and he will continue not to show up. So this is a Pokemon that in this regulation has gotten new life. We didn't see anybody using Hisuian Decidueye before that, and we won't see anybody using it afterwards. Yes, it has Scrappy, and it could probably one-shot. Probably can't one-shot because it's neutral. It's resisted from Psychic. So yeah, he's just bad. He's bad against both Calyrexes. Superior is bad. He's good in the new Pokemon TCG Pocket game though. The new Superior, very good. Okay, Here we go. Here's the first controversial Pokemon in this this list. We got quite a few more, so hopefully you guys are hanging around. If you are, thank you guys. I do appreciate it. But we have Sneasler. Now, there has been a conversation online. Which Pokemon is more busted? Sneasler or Urshifu? And there's a group of people who say Sneasler. And those people are wrong. He's trash. Sneasler's trash. He seems good right now because of how restricted the format is to these specific Pokemon. If Fluttermane was just in the game, this Pokemon's trash. If Iron Hands was in the game, like in the format, he's just trash. He's only good because he's a product of his environment. He's not good. He's not good. And if you are one of the people who are going to carry Sneasler, I'm looking at you people, okay? If you are one of the people who think you're going to carry Sneasler over and he's going to be a staple, my friend, I'd rather have Ludicolo. That's all I'm going to say. All right. The other one, this one. No, this is the worst one, right? Is this Uxie? No, this is Uxie. Why did I call the other one Uxie? The other one was Azelf. Azelf is the best one. I don't know. I got those mixed up. Chandelure, they're all bad, though. Chandelure is pretty bad. We did see some usage of it in this Regulation G and before Regulation H, but nah. This Zoroark is bad. You just don't use him. He's just not really worth using. Bombardier. I wish Bombardier was good because I like this Pokemon, but it's bad. Okay, Grass Ogerpon. I think Grass Ogerpon is team specific. I think it's a good Pokemon, but yeah, it's team specific. You Terastallize, you get that speed boost, which is huge. It's really good into Water Ogerpon, so it has that going for it. But against Fire Ogerpon, it gets absolutely annihilated. So you got to be careful. It's good against the Rock one too. But yeah, getting that speed boost can actually be super beneficial. We saw that in some of the regionals that we saw in the past, where this thing getting the speed boost. I think even at Worlds, there was a match where this getting the speed boost actually won the game. So yeah, he's pretty good. Persimmon is bad. He's just not good. This Thundurus is bad. It just doesn't really do anything. Yeah, he gets Volt Absorb or whatever, but Torterra is awful. People thought he was going to be really good in Regulation G, but he just wasn't. Brute Bonnet, I don't want to sleep on Brute Bonnet. I'm going to put him in the niche category because he still gets Spore and he's good against Calyrex Shadow. He's actually good against both Calyrexes because he does pressure them with his secondary, which is Dark. So you could go for like a Dark Terrestrialization, kind of a similar role that King Gambit plays, but also be able to Spore or also go for those Sucker Punches. So yeah, you can do quite a few things with him. And that Grass Terrestrialization gives him a better matchup into like Kyogre. So there are some really cool things you can do with them. Porygon 2. I think Porygon 2 is definitely team specific. I think this Pokemon's still really good. It can't be hit by Calyrex Shadow Rider with Astral Barrage, so you're almost guaranteed a setup. It is bad against Urshifu, though it does live a close combat. So, yeah, and if you could fake out the other Pokemon, then you're perfectly fine. Galvantula is bad. Palma is pretty bad. I'm not going to see his team specific. I will put him up here, though. Gets Fake Out, but the electric typing, once again, is just going to be its downfall. Electrike has always been terrible. He just needs better stats, and then he could be viable. I can't really cut out Dragapult, because every time I do, he just does really well. So I'm going to put him in the niche viability. I think he could be used on some teams. He has some usage in certain cases, but overall, he's just not that great. This Tornadus is bad. It has Regenerator, but is bad. Braviary is bad. This Braviary is also bad. I remember in Sword and Shield, Braviary, nasty. It was so good. Hydrapple, I love Hydrapple. I love his design. I think he's so cool. I love all of them except Flapple. Flapple could literally disappear and I wouldn't care. But yeah, he's just not very good. His move only works on certain turns, and it's just not good. This dude is terrible. I can't think of his name right now. Also terrible. They just don't do anything. If Rain is up, he's fast, but that's about it. And he's bulky. Flapple, terrible. Cabalion's also terrible. You thought I was going to put him in viability. No, Cabalion is terrible. He just doesn't really do anything. You're better off just using either of the other two, but more specifically, you're going to use Terrakion wherever Terrakion ended up going. Did I put him in team specific? Yeah, here he is. Terrakion. I said I wouldn't underrate Spore, but I'm going to here. Toadscruel is not very good. His ability really holds him back, so you would have to use like the Wheezing, like we saw Wolf Glick win with. Once again, don't follow Wolf Glick because you are not Wolf Glick. Virizion is bad. He just doesn't really do anything. Once again, just use Terrakion. He's just better. You're bad. He just doesn't do anything. He does normal attacks, really. All right, Tornadus. Tornadus is definitely a staple Pokemon. I'm going to put him like here. He sees more usage than we see something like the Whimsicott get, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better than the Whimsicott. It just does different things than the Whimsicott. Bleakwind Storm was a huge buff to this Pokemon. Despite it being able to miss, it misses less than Hurricane. And if the rain's up, then it doesn't matter, and you're hitting both Pokemon, which is more significant than just hitting one. I do like Whimsicott more, just because of that Encore ability, and it's faster, so you can go for taunts, too. So you can get something a little bit cooler off there. But, yeah, overall, Tornadus is just used more, and overall, it might be just a little bit stronger. Man, I wish this thing was good too, but it's not. Mudsdale is awful. He's just a ground type, doesn't really do too much. With stamina, you can boost him up if you go for like beat ups, just like you can anything. And he does get body press, so maybe. Urshifu Dark. Urshifu Dark is definitely very viable. Really strong Pokemon. Pressures a lot of the restricted with that dark type, but also that fighting type, be able to support it too. It's just Flutter Mane is very strong into this Pokemon. Very, very strong. Pheasantipity. I'm going to put Pheasantipity in niche. I think it's still pretty good. It can poison stuff, which is, or toxic even. It can lower the speed of your opponent and toxic them. That, in my opinion, is very good. So, Regice. We saw Regice do pretty good back in like, I don't remember what reg, like E or something, but that was just for like one tournament. Iron Valiant is awful. It's not very good. It just has no bulk. Just no bulk. Man, Enamorus. Okay, so I thought going into this game in general that Enamorus, especially the other form, was going to be so good. This Pokemon's bad. It's not good at all. It just feels so weak to use. Toxtricity, not good. Ting-Lu. Good old Ting-Lu. It's definitely team specific. I can't wait to use Ting-Lu again. I love Ting-Lu, and yeah, I have a lot of fun using it. It's extremely good against Calyrex Shadow Rider. So not only does it passively just make it weaker, but it also just eats its attacks and one-shots it. So it's cool. Lando-I. Lando-I is a very viable Pokemon. Now, we talked about Lando-T and how Lando-T just died. Any other game, Lando-T was on every team. Like, not joking. Go back and look at results from tournaments, from past games, from Sword and Shield, from, you know, Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun and Moon, whatever it might be. You're going to see Landorus-T, and you will never see Landorus-I. Maybe once or twice you'll see Landorus-I. Landorus-I is good in Regulation H. It just puts a lot of pressure on some of the Pokemon and just outputs a ton of damage. Those Sludge Bombs hit like crazy, bro. They hit like crazy. Moltres. Moltres is bad. I wish Moltres is good. I really do like Moltres. I use Dark Moltres all the time, though. Stonejourner. You can use Stonejourner to power up your Calyrex Shadow Rider, if you'd like. Hatterene. I think Hatterene has to go in the niche viability. I think it's okay. It's weak to Shadow Rider, but it is very slow. with 29 base speed, I believe. Makes it slower than almost everything besides Torkoal. So you can get off your expanding forces before they can attack you first. And if you go for that Fire Terra Mystic Fire, you could do some significant damage to Calyrex Ice Rider. So keep that in mind too. We have Greninja, who is not very good. I wish Greninja was better, but it just doesn't do anything. Its damage output is so lackluster. We saw a little bit of a resurgence of Toxicroak, but he's still pretty bad. You can go for fake outs and poison jabs, but that's about it. I'm gonna put... I'll put Talonflame in niche viability because it still does have, I believe, the fastest Tailwind. And that's good. Pyroar is bad. This is another Pokemon I really wish was good. Its typing is interesting with normal fire, but it just doesn't output any damage. Sandaconda is bad. Once again, you have to hit it for the sand to go up, and then it doesn't even get a boost off the sand, so it's like... Revavroom has a really good typing. It just doesn't do anything, but this thing eats Fluttermane alive. So, Go-Go is awful. Clauser, whatever his name is, he's awful too. Halucha is awful. He just doesn't... These Pokemon just don't do anything. They don't really have any damage output. Halucha maybe a little bit, but it's just not very good. Okay, Iron Bundle. We saw Iron Bundle the last time. It used to be on every team, right? And then maybe it became a little bit more stapley, you know, going further in the regulations. Now I think it's team specific. I think on certain teams this is a really good Pokemon. It's just super, super frail. And you're using your Water Spot when your Water Spot can go for Urshifu instead. So you're giving up the ability to hit through Protect just for a super, super fast Pokemon. So which one do you prefer? But with Miraidon, sometimes you want to be running the Iron Bundle so you can have a super, super fast, you know, Icy Wind maybe. This guy who I can't think of his name right now is not very good. He does get Prankster, but that's about it. Noibat is pretty bad. He doesn't really... Not Noibat. What is this one? Whatever. He's not very good. Overquill is pretty bad too. We saw a little bit of usage of Overquill, like one team that did very well with Overquill, but I just think that was just happenstance. I don't think it's very good. Tatsugiri, you always have to put Tatsugiri in niche viability because it's going to go with Dondozo, and Dondozo is always going to be slightly viable, whether you like it or not. The Decidueye is awful. He just doesn't do anything. Long Reach is like a pretty bad ability. Miss Magius is pretty bad too. Fluttermane exists, so why would you use... I would say, you know, Walmart one, but it came out first, but that's beside the point. Regular Goodra, I think regular Goodra is pretty bad. It's bulky, but it just doesn't have any moves that like do any damage. Tinkaton is in a similar thing like that. Like its typing is extremely good, but it just has one good attack. Though you can Helping Hand your own Goldango, so if you want to do that. This is probably the best Oricorio, the Ghost one, but it's not very good either. Man. Colossal is so bad. This has to be one of the biggest fall-offs of all time, right? It's Colossal from Sword and Shield into Scarlet and Violet. This Pokemon was insane. It was insane. I'm just going to put the other Tatsugiris down here. I didn't know all of them would be showing up, but just know that they're up there. Kilowattrel is good right now. It's actually a pretty decent Pokemon. I wouldn't say it's good. It's pretty decent, but in this restricted format, it's not very good. Once again, you get that electric typing. You're already going to be countered by things that are getting countering Miraidon. Lumineon is awful. He's really good in the TCG, but he is awful in the game. Palafin. Now, I thought Palafin was going to be very good in Regulation G. Showed that he wasn't. That transforming ability is just such a cost that it makes it a really hard Pokemon to use and not super, super good. Wo-Chien. I think Wo-Chien is still going to be some niche viability. We saw it at Worlds. That's it. Did it do well? It did okay. It did okay. right? I think it had a pretty good finish, but just nothing spectacular. It's never won an event, so. Gold Duck is awful. He doesn't really do anything. We already rated you, except you're just the worst version. Rabombi. We see Rabombi was pretty good in this regulation. We saw one team that used it pretty effectively, but it's just really bad, right? It just doesn't have damage output. It has 0 bulk. It has negative bulk, I would even say. Wish Cash is pretty bad. There are some good grass Pokemons, Ogerpons, that make this Pokemon just never be able to be used. We already talked about Lycanroc, and this is just the worst version. Abomasnow is just worse than going for what's his face here, Ninetales. Rotom Wash is bad, though he's the best of the Rotoms because he's Rotom Wash. He misses Will-O-Wisps. Greedot is bad. It can go for like Belly Drum, I think, but that's about it. It doesn't really put any damage. Next we have Sinistcha, though. Sinistcha is team specific, but this is a very good Pokemon. Just heals up your good stuff, right? Like your Calyrex or your Calyrex Ice Rider, or you might have something like Zamazenta. This is just going to heal it up, and yeah, it's just free. It's just free. And I can go for Trick Room. I can go for Machigacha, which can get burns. Like Machigacha can get burns, is a huge thing. As I know this thing didn't see a ton of play the last time this format was around, but I think it is still nichely viable because it is so good into Shadow Rider, and it's also okay into Ice Rider. As it can go for taunts, or it can go for the foul plays, which are big deals. What did I call this one? This is Lurantis, right? What did I call the other one? I don't remember. This is Lurantis, though. I forgot what I called the other one. My bad. Once again, I'm making this when I'm tired, and that's a bad idea. Drifbloom is pretty bad. Either way, Lurantis is bad. No, whatever one I called, whatever one. Did I call it? Because it's Lepan. It's Lepan. No, I forgot what its name is. Okay, Drifbloom is pretty bad. Yeah, you can go for a couple of things. Like, you can get Evasion up and go for Baton Pass, but, Okay. Getting into some of these interesting Pokemon now. So we got Gouging Fire. I think Gouging Fire is team specific. We saw a decrease in the usage of Gouging Fire going into the restricted format just because of the fact that like it just wasn't as strong, but then it started to pick up viability as it went on. So it'll be interesting to see if this continues to gain on that viability or if that viability continues to drop off. But I think it's definitely team specific. It can do quite a bit of damage. Heat Crash does a ton because this Pokemon is so heavy, and it gets Howl, which can power up your other Pokemon, which we've seen a lot of in this format with coaching. So be cool to see if this continues to go for those Howls. Next we have Walking Wake. Walking Wake never really showed that it was really good, but I think it's also team specific. I think we could see the rise of this Pokemon a little bit more. It's very strong, especially, I was going to say especially if the sun's up, but if the sun or the rain are up, this Pokemon gets boosted. So we could see some more usage of this. We saw a lot of speed boost ones and stuff like that. So King Gambit. King Gambit's always been good since the drop of the game, and I think it's going to continue to be good. I think it's a team-specific Pokemon, but it's very good into both Calyrexes. I mean, it's probably the best answer for both. If you're trying to counter both on one Pokemon, it's probably the best one. Its damage output is so strong, and it's just like, even if you go for Fairy Terra, I can still hit you for super effective. This is awful. It's one of the worst Pokemon. Avalugg is so bad. Garganacl is bad, but man, I wish he was still good because I loved using Garganacl back in Regulation A, even pre-Regulation A, I would say. It was just so much fun. Corviknight, I think Corviknight is niche viability. It can't be hit by Landorus Eye, which is a huge buff to it, and it can be super bulky. It's actually really good into Zamazenta, So, yeah, I think we'll see some Corviknights being used, but it probably won't perform super, super well. Dondozo, big old Dondozo is definitely team specific. And the reason why he's so far ahead of Tatsugiri, who is, I don't, where did I put Tatsugiri? I thought I put him here. Oh, there he is because this could be used without Tatsugiri, but Tatsugiri can't really be used without Dondozo. So, this is pretty good. You can go for Yawn, like you could do the Yawn stuff, or you could just go for the regular Dondozo strats. So very, very good. This is probably one of the worst Pokemon of all time. A Pokemon I love to use in this regulation, I'm going to put this on team specific as well. It's going to be around where Komo-o is. I like this better than Komo-o personally. And one of the reasons is because it just absolutely walls Urshifu. As soon as you get a couple of boosts and you go into a fairy typing, this can't hurt it at all. It also one-shots a ton of pretty common Pokemon like this and like Incineroar, and you know it can one-shot potentially the Farigiraf, but you probably have to two-shot. So it could do some significant damage into all those Pokemon, but mainly because it just absolutely walls Urshifus that are on every single team. It's not super good into Calyrex Shadow Rider, but it's insane against Calyrex Ice Rider. Spiritomb is pretty bad. He has some okay stats, like defense-wise, and he could set up Trick Room, but after that, he just kind of feels meh. Go for Will-O-Wisp and stuff. Palisand is also pretty bad. His typing, like, offensively is very good, but defensively, he is awful. Next, we have Samurott Dark. Samurott Dark is a pretty good Pokemon. It's much better than regular Samurott, and with sharpness and like Night Slash, it just does huge amounts of damage. It also has that Aqua Cutter, which is huge too, because then you can hit fire types for super effective. It just does a ton of damage. And yeah, you can give it Choice Band, or you can give it something to guarantee its crits, like the Scope Lens. Okay. So Iron Leaves, right? If you see my video, I use Iron Leaves very successfully, but it's pretty bad overall. I mean, it can be super, super fast with booster energy, and it can go for coaching, which is huge because it's one of the only fighting types, if not the only fighting type, that actually gets coaching. So you can go for coachings with this thing and boost up your own Pokemon. A lot of people use it as an attacker, but I think it's better off used as a support Pokemon. Frillish is, or not Frillish. Why did I call it Frillish? Whatever this thing is called, because now I can't think of its name. Now I called it Frillish. It's pretty bad. I know some people really like it, and it does the same thing as, you know, Farigiraf, but it's just way worse. Venomoth is awful. It doesn't do anything. It just like does powder moves and just gets knocked out. Croconaw is bad. He can attack. Does Aqua Jet. Toxapex is pretty bad too. You can go for Baneful Bunker and, you know, still get hit by Urshifu, so that's good. Next we have Rillaboom. Of course, good old Rillaboom. Rillaboom is very, very strong, especially with the rise of Miraidon. Rillaboom has only gotten better, and the reason because you can get rid of that terrain. It's also really good on Galapagos teams to keep your Galapagos healed up. And it's good on, like, just generally teams that need fake out and to change terrain. And that's it. That's all you need. You could just throw this on as a catch-all. It also does pretty good damage. Just with Wood Hammer, you can also go for, like, Drum Beating, which we've seen more recently, where it's going to lower the speed too. So, pretty good. Mimikyu. I thought Mimikyu would be good in Regulation G. It has not been. I still don't think it's going to be any good. It can set up Trick Room almost reliably, but overall, it's just pretty mad. And it gets knocked out by Urshifu because it breaks the thing and then hits it 2 more times, so it's pretty rough. Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu is very viable. We saw a lot of Chi-Yu in the past. This is one of the Pokemon I'm not looking forward to facing again because it's just so strong. It just powers up its partner Pokemon and as well as does a ton of damage. It's good against both of the Calyrexes. It's good against a lot of the restricteds, to be honest. besides maybe that Miraidon and Koraidon. But other than that, it's very good against most of them, and it's super, super strong. Cinderace is bad, even though it has a good ability. It just doesn't have damage output. Slitherwing, unfortunately, is also bad. I do like Slitherwing. It's just not good. It's just not good. Dedenne is very, very bad. Just doesn't do anything that you can't do with Raichu, and also Raichu's just better. Iron Hands. Iron Hands is a staple. I'm going to put him... I'll put him right under Farigiraf, I think. They get used on samey teams. He's a really good Pokemon if your team is weak to Trick Room, because he's able to perform under Trick Room as well. He's super slow, super bulky, and his attack stat is way too high for what it should be. And yeah, he's just very, very good. You could put Assault Vest on him to make him just unbelievable bulky. And he's very good into that Miraidon matchup that a lot of teams might struggle with. And this could be their catch-all, where it can fake out. And it can also put pressure on it with Drain Punch. Oh yeah, he gets Drain Punch, so he heals himself back up. And if you can get something like a Howl on him using, you know, something like the Gouging Fire, then he's just going to be a massive, massive threat. So, Iron Hands, one of my favorite Pokemon to use. I really, really do enjoy using him. He's just very good. Iron Crown is actually pretty viable. He's probably going to be your best Expanding Force user, just because, yeah, he's quick, so you can get it off. We saw a lot of that before, especially at the beginning of the regulation. It kind of did drop off, and it's because people are using it in the regulation before, so it kind of carried over a little bit. Scrafty is bad. I know I did that video where I really liked Scrafty in Regulation G, but it's now really bad. Alcremie, I think Alcremie is a little bit viable, but not enough to put it into the niche viability. It goes for those decorates, and that can make your like partner Pokemon do so much damage. You can use it with Iron Ball, so that way it's slower than Calyrex, and you can just get free boost stuff. So, Barraskewda is awful. He's not very good. The other T, because I want to just call him Sinistea, but that's not him. Goldango is still good. He's been good kind of since the beginning. I'm gonna put him in very viable. He's probably here. This is probably a little bit lower. Very, very good Pokemon. I mean, what can you say other than that? It's just it could just output so much damage. Being able to not be hit by fighting attacks as a steel type is very good. He has ghost coverage and steel coverage, which are two really good offensive types. And yeah, it's just Nasty Plot, right? Nasty Plot is good. And we've seen Normal Terra. That's what we saw at Worlds mostly, was Normal Terra. And then it was able to deal with those Calyrexes pretty easily. Titan is bad. I wish this Pokemon was good because he's one of my favorite from this generation. Whatever this guy's name is, the Lynx guy, whatever, he's pretty bad. He's never done anything. Penurchant is awful. Don't use this Pokemon. Unfortunately, Appleton is awful. I wish this Pokemon was good because I love this Pokemon. And when I first saw it, I didn't realize how small it was. This thing is a tiny, tiny Pokemon, and I love it. It's so good. It's so bad, but the design is so good. Frostmoth is awful. It can be pretty bulky. We did see a little bit usage of it before the restricted format. And yeah, it also gets Wide Guard. So Rapska can revive things, but he's just so weak that he never really gets to. Indeedee Female is a staple. Indeedee Female is very good. I'm gonna put it here. This is a staple Pokemon in these restrictive formats, as once again, the Follow Me is very good. We talked about that earlier, but also gets Trick Room now, which is very strong. Can't be hit by Calyrex, Shadow Riders, Astral Barrage, and it also gets Helping Hand. So it has a lot of viability. It completely stops priority moves from your opponent, which is very good too. Stops your opponent from faking out, going for, extreme speeds, anything like that. And yeah, allows you to get Trick Room up pretty much 100% of the time. So much so that people have to run in prison, which then makes them have to go for imprison. So they're wasting a turn going for imprison sometimes. Despite what Nick might say, Caparaj is terrible. I wish he was good, but he's just not. Crabominable, also terrible. Not very good Pokemon. We forgot you. And then we have Iron Moth. And I think Iron Moth is decent. You can go for Speed Boost with this thing and Acid Spray into Astral Barrage, which is very, very good. Or you could just go for some general things like, if you go with this, with Miraidon, then you can get a Speed Boost without having to go for that. You can use Choice Specs or anything, and then you could just go like Heat Wave. So it could do some really cool things. Once again, we're just going to put that Tatsugiri there. We have Ogerpon Hearth Flame, and then this is going to be a staple, probably the top of the staples. This is the second best of the Ogerpons. I know we saw a growth of the rock ones, but I think fire and water are still the two best ones. Super strong. Getting attack boost is huge, and we saw this used in a lot of the Koraidon teams because they don't really share a weakness. In actuality, they resist each other what they're weak to besides ground, and that's only when this terrestrializes. So we saw that a lot because you're putting up the sun anyways. You get the boost. We also saw this with the gouging fires, so they can go for Howl, so you're getting a +2. So there's some really, really cool things you can do with the Ogerpon in general, and just really put a lot of pressure with those Ivy Cudgels and those Horn Leeches, where you're just taking one-shots on so many Pokemon, and it outspeeds stuff like the Urshifu. That's why we saw a lot of Urshifu starting to use those Choice Scarfs just for this matchup, really. So really, really good there. Ghost Horse is pretty bad. Honestly, once again, it's weak to the same things that the daddy version is weak to, so it just kind of loses some of the viability that way. Archludon, we saw a ton of Archludon in Regulation G. I think it'll continue over. We did see a little sprinkling of it throughout the format, the Regulation H before. And I think we'll see a little bit more of it, but it's very niche, and it's pretty easily countered. Once again, this guy's legal, so it makes it a little bit harder to use. Whatever this thing is called, Oinklong or something. Baxcalibur, I think Baxcalibur is pretty bad. I don't think it's viable enough. The main ice type that's going to be used is just better, and they kind of get countered by similar things, which is not Urshifu, Incineroar. So yeah, it just makes it a little bit harder to use. We did see somebody use this pretty successfully, but I really don't think that Iron Shreds is good. I just think it's so weak. It just doesn't have the damage output. Ogerpon Cornerstone. I think Cornerstone is going to be in the very viable tier. Probably around here. It depends on how prevalent this one is, because this puts so much pressure on this, and this is also good against Calyrex Ice Rider too, so it has a little bit of an advantage over the fire one, where, well, they're both good against it, but this stops them from being able to terrestrialize into fire, so then they have to be water if they want to survive it, and then it's also hitting the water one for super effective. So you have a little bit there, whereas if they are fire and you're this, then it's just kind of walling you. So, yeah. Meowscarada is pretty bad. It couldn't even make a resurgence in G. We saw a few of them, but nothing that really made a difference. Avalugg, once again, is terrible. Same reasons as the other one. Enamorus, once again, I thought Enamorus was going to be very good, especially this version. Just in general, I thought this was going to be like super overused Pokemon, but it has been absolutely garbage. Well, fortunately, I guess. Skeledirge is pretty bad in this format. I thought it'd be better in G, but it just wasn't. Quill, whatever this guy's name is, not very good. This is the same Pokemon. Low Kicks is awful. He's just bad. He's just very bad. It just doesn't really do anything. Mousehold. I love Mousehold, and I think it's team specific. I'm going to put it over here because it can do quite a bit. Of course, beat up stuff. It can also go for beat up stuff onto the Archludon, but it also has Follow Me. It has Super Fang. It has, you know, Population Bomb. So it can do quite a few things. Its speed tier is very good. Population Bomb one-shots Urshifus, so that's really good too. So it could do quite a few things, but nothing really that great. Not as great as it can in these less power formats. But you will definitely be seeing me use Mousehold. Next we have Delphox, terrible Pokemon. Ice-Q, also terrible Pokemon. These guys terrible. They do get Intimidate, but they just don't have the stats. Rapidos is terrible. I don't know why there's two. Do they have different stats? The colors, I guess they must do. Ceruledge, I think, is niche viability. I think it's pretty bad, but I think if you wanted to use it, you could make it work and maybe win some games with it, especially on ladder. It does have Shadow Sneak, which does put a lot of pressure on Calyrex Ice or Shadow Rider, though it's not super great into Miraidon. Belly Bolt's pretty bad. It doesn't really have great stats. I still hate that its eyes are these little things and not the big things. Brambleghast, people thought this was going to be good going into the format because it was good right before the format, and it just wasn't, and it hasn't seen a resurgence at all. Scovillain is bad. Its one move is cool, but it's bad. Morpeko is one of the worst Pokemon. It's awful. Toucannon is really bad. His main move is okay. He's cool in a playthrough, but not anywhere else. Espathra could be pretty good. But it takes a second to set up, and it shares weaknesses with the Pokemon you want to use it with, which is Calyrex Shadow Rider. Next we have Regidrago, and Regidrago is viable for sure. We saw a lot of Regidrago during Worlds and stuff. This Pokemon is just putting a lot of pressure, and it's relatively bulky. And against certain teams, this Pokemon just absolutely wins. It just absolutely wins. Ogerpon Water. I'm going to put here as the top of the staples. Once again, you're going to be using one of these two Ogerpons on your team, and most teams are probably going to have an Ogerpon, or at least the Ogerpon adjacent. Because you might be running Rillaboom, but some teams are running Rillaboom and an Ogerpon because they're kind of playing different roles. So we could see both, plus this powers up this into Grassy Glide. So, yeah. Psych Lizard is bad. Comfey, I think Comfey is actually niche viability. It can heal up pretty well because it has priority 3 healing moves, and can also Draining Kiss, which just one-shots this Urshifu and almost one-shots this Urshifu. If you do put some investment in, it one-shots this Urshifu. So, yeah, it's really good Pokemon into all of that. Orthworm, however, is pretty bad. You can use it for some, like, random wins where you just go, or Orthworm Shed Tail, but you're going to struggle to get that. Comatose, no, that's not his name. That's his ability. Or whatever. He's bad. I don't remember his name. Glamora is almost good, but I just think it's probably in the trash tier. We saw a little bit increase of the usage. Actually, you know what? No, because we did see the increased usage of it, and it using Meteor Beam and being pretty successful using Meteor Beam. So I'm gonna put it up in niche viability up at the top because yeah, if it's gonna do that again, I think it has a place. Graveyard is bad. Yeah, you can go for Last Respects, but he's just kind of slow. Ice Horse, I'm going to put Ice Horse in niche viability just at the very bottom because I think he can be used, but he's just it's just missing something. You know, that's the best way I could put it. Ice Rotom is bad. Now, this is a Pokemon that, you know, was good at the beginning of this format, Regulation G, but it's not very good right now. I hate this Pokemon, so he's going to go down here even if he was good. Now, this is an interesting one. Okay, and let me tell you why. Because he was so good at the beginning when they first allowed Paradox Pokemon that it wasn't even funny. Like, for a while, he was just felt so busted, but now he's just trash. He's just garbage. He has no special defense. You hit him with Icy Wind and he's dead. Like, that's not even a joke. Like, that's not even an exaggeration. Fluttermane. I think you all know what's about to happen. Fluttermane is probably the best Pokemon that you could add to your team. Like, you could take this 6 right here and add Restricted and just call it a day. Just send it. Just be like, yeah, that's my team. Got my Fire, Water, Grass. I got my Restricted. I got a Fairy. I got a Redirector. I'm good to go. That's all I need. Yeah, Fluttermane is insane. It does so much damage. It can play so many different roles. You can go for like Icy Wind, or you can go for Moonblast. You can go for, just a Shadow Ball. Like, it just does everything. It can terrestrialize into 50 different types. You run Terra Blast if you want to, though it's probably not really worth it. It gets hit by one physical attack. It's probably knocked out, but you can make it bulky too, which is crazy to think because it's 50-50. And then you just make it bulky and it just lives things, and it's just insane. Iron Jugulis. I don't think I need to say more about it. Iron Jugulis is definitely a niche pick. We saw it used with Kyogre. I think at the World Championships even. I think people were using it with Kyogre. It was pretty good. To me, it always feels like it's just missing that one thing. It can't be like taunted by, and this is one of the reasons why people are using it a lot. It can't be taunted by any of the prankster users, so you're able to get off your Tailwind pretty successfully, and it's really, really fast, especially booster energy. So, Sandy Shocks is pretty bad. His typing is really good offensively, but he just doesn't have the stats to back it up, and doesn't really put any pressure. Iron Thorns is probably the worst one, though I say that after I had lost to Iron Thorns. Yeah, I lost to Iron Thorns. This was before before Regulation H. At a PC, I was playing like a super bulky team, and I'm not kidding. This Iron Thorns had a move that hit every single one of my Pokemon, even if I terrestrialized super effectively, except for my Incineroar, who turned into Ghost type, and that was it. But I couldn't stop this thing. I couldn't do anything to it because my team was so slow and bulky that this thing just ate through my team. It was crazy because he was like he was booster attack, and then just like would go coaching and just keep boosting this thing up with coaching. It was crazy. It was crazy. Chen Pao is I'm gonna put it under staples. I'm gonna put very viable, because during the World Championships I thought this Pokemon would be so much better, and it just really wasn't. So I'm just gonna put it down a tier. Though you're still gonna see a ton of it, especially with the Ogerpon. It's gonna sit next to that. It's gonna sit next to the Urshifus and stuff like that, and just put a lot of pressure on. It's a dark type, so that's really good. And ice typing is not bad itself, as it's good against a lot of the grass types like Amoonguss and Rillaboom. So very, very good Pokemon. Has priority attack as well, so really good. Zoroark, I thought Zoroark would be good in Regulation G. It just ended up being kind of meh. It's not really good in these restricted formats, as there's a lot of fast Pokemon that are faster than it, so you can't really take anything by surprise. Miniors are terrible. It's just not a good Pokemon. Really cool concept though. I do like how it breaks into like a really shiny, cool looking, not shiny, but like a cool looking like inner core, and then the shiny versions, you don't know if it's shiny until it breaks open. It's just a really cool concept Pokemon. I'm gonna do this one first. I think for some reason I can't think of his name either. Iron, that one. I think he's niche viability. He can do a lot of damage. His move is really good. It hits through Protect. I mean, hitting through Protect is huge, right? Like it's Mighty Cleave is his attack, but I can't think of his name for some reason. Iron Terrakion. He does some pretty good damage, but he's just kind of meh, and his typing is not very good, so he just kind of loses. If I guess if he, I don't know what typing would have made him better. That he could have been. All right, but last but not least, because these are all restricted Pokemon, as you can see, and we already did the restricted tier list, but the last but not least Pokemon, it's got to be, right. It's gotta be. I mean, Raging Bolt is just so he has restricted stats on a non-restricted Pokemon, and that's just crazy. He's so good into Urshifu and Water Ogre Pond that it's kind of crazy. He's even good in some ways against Fluttermane, as it's just becomes so bulky, and you could power this thing up by going Electric Terrestrialization, or you can go Fairy Terrestrialization, which is what we saw a lot at Worlds, especially up against those Miraidon teams. This thing walls Miraidon if it's not that Fairy Terra version, or if it's not running Dazzling Gleam. This thing just eats through that Pokemon with that Fairy Terra, because you have to lock into Draco Meteor, then you can't hit this thing at all. So it just does so much into what's the best typing in the game, and it's just such a strong Pokemon. It has a priority attack, electric priority attack at 70 base. You go Booster Energy, special attack on this thing, and there's just no way they're eating through it. Its defenses are so high, its HP is insane, its special attack is like 134 or some random number. It's such a good Pokemon, and probably the second best non-restricted out there. But anyways, guys, that is my tier list right there. This was a 2-hour long video, so please like the video, because this was a lot of effort to go through and a lot of talking. My throat is very dry at the moment. I need to get a water for sure. But yeah, let me know if you guys are excited for Regulation H's return. I am not personally. I wish they would have just moved on, but I know they're going for that double restricted format into Worlds, so when that comes around, we will cover that as well. But anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, make sure you guys thumbs it up. If you're not subscribed, make sure you guys do so, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.